All right, everybody, welcome to the daily Dynasty briefing, going over the news and transactions of yesterday, Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. We're going to dive right into it. I'm going right through the headlines in the order that they hit the football news yesterday. Then we'll take a quick sweep at the transactions to see if there is anything of note that was missed in the headline items, and then I'll get us on our way for the day. All right, starting out yesterday for March 11th, Tuesday morning, I'm going to read the headlines and then react to anything that needs to be reacted to. Browns agree to terms with Cornelius Lucas. That's not a big deal. Javon Holland signed with the Giants. I don't. If I'm an NFL GM organization, I'm not putting a lot of money into the safety position. The Giants kind of had their hand forced to. Not that Holland is a bad player. He's going to be fine for them, but 3 years, $45 million, $30 million guaranteed. The Giants seem to be missing out on all of the opportunity out there. I think players with options are rejecting going to the Giants. They're going elsewhere. They don't want to be a part of the Giants organization if they have other similar, better options. They had to pay up and buy Javon Holland. I don't think that's a real win. It's somebody that's going to play, but that's not what you want to do fiscally for your NFL team. Jordan Mason for the 49ers was tendered at a second round level, $5.3 million salary that goes with that. I'm sure they'll work out something to break that up. No team's going to come in, swoop in, and try to claim him or give him a contract and give up a second round draft pick for Jordan Mason. Not in this era where we're about to have 20 legit running backs dumped into the NFL monetary supply from the NFL draft. So the running back valuations is going to be greatly depressed. Where just really good running backs like a Jordan Mason, there's going to be a million of them. There's no reason to pay them, so nobody's going to go claim Jordan Mason and pay a second rounder for it. The Vikings, who I noted this morning on Fantasy Football Metrics on my morning notes article, the Vikings had themselves a really winning day on Tuesday on March 11th. It started with them landing Jonathan Allen, a very good defensive tackle, was a Pro Bowler back-to-back years, I think 21 and 22, not in 23, and then was injured and only played about half a season in 24, but he is still talented. That's a great signing by the Vikings, who are making their way to the top of the NFL with personnel and coaching combined. If J.J. McCarthy comes through, and maybe it's going to take a year, the Vikings are really the team to watch. Not that they didn't have a great season last season, but the Vikings, as being the dominant franchise in the NFL, they seem to be within reach of grabbing that brass ring. Dolphins agreed with Melifonwu, formerly of the Lions. Not a big investment there. That's fine. Divine Diablo, the Falcons bought him. The Raiders let him walk. He's a solid hand, good player for the Falcons. That's not going to hurt them. Elijah Campbell signed by the Dolphins corner. That's just a depth move. Will Freeze, never know how to say his name. Right guard, I do know he's good and a key right guard for the Colts. 5 years, $88 million going to the Vikings, part of the Vikings killer day. Jonathan Allen, and then picking up the Colts guard. You got to win. You got to have the quarterback, but right there, equal with it now is you have to have the offensive line. That's what the Lions have showed us. That's what the defending Super Bowl champs have showed us. That's what ultimately broke Kansas City's back. I'm surprised they made it to the Super Bowl with their offensive line issues. Offensive line leads the way, and the Vikings are loading up. They already had a good offensive line as it was, a really good offensive line, and now they're just adding some of the good Colts offensive linemen. They got Ryan Kelly, I believe, on the day prior, and that's a great move as well. The Vikings are really starting to load up and starting to be able to separate away from the pack in a great NFC North if J.J. McCarthy comes through, and it may take a year. Not that he's going to be bad this year, but if he's as good as I think he can be, linked up with Kevin O'Connell, in a year from now, Minnesota's going to be the dominant team in the NFL. 49ers signed Richie Grant of the Falcons. I liked Richie Grant coming out of college, but he had some moments with the Falcons, but never really fully came through. The Vikings, another thing that hasn't happened yet, but it was rumored at this time early in the morning on Tuesday, as I'm reading through the news reports. They're talking to Javon Hargrave. That would be a big pickup for the defense. I mean, if the Vikings get Javon Hargrave teamed up with Jonathan Allen, I mean, that is massive. All of these teams that are chasing after the edge rushers, it's about the defensive tackles. It's not about the edge rushers. The edge rushers are interchangeable species that are way, way, way overpriced in the marketplace. You can get deals on the defensive tackles who are to me are more critical to defensive line operations and pass rush and everything else. So you see, that's where the Vikings are going. Smart teams like the Vikings aren't running around chasing all these edge rushers. They're grabbing offensive line interior, defensive line interior. That's the way it needs to be done. And the Vikings are just killing it with that plan. Bengals re-signed Marco Wilson, not a big deal. Then there was the Daniel Jones signing, 1 year, $14 million. At this point, the news headline is that he's deciding between the Colts and the Vikings. I think the fact that he didn't pick the Vikings, I'm sure the Vikings offered less money because they don't need him. Because I think the Vikings absolutely believe in J.J. McCarthy and that he is going to be their starting quarterback. I'm not buying any Aaron Rodgers or anything else there unless it's an incredible deal and those guys know that they're coming to more be a backup and mentor for J.J. McCarthy, an insurance chip. Daniel Jones would have been perfect for that. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to Minnesota to battle J.J. McCarthy and ultimately lose to J.J. McCarthy. Daniel Jones could have reasonably gone there to be a backup, but Daniel Jones picking the Colts, ultimately is going to pick the Colts in this news day. It's because, like I've believed all along since mid last season, that Anthony Richardson benching and all the news that came out after that, we only know a quarter of the problems of the story of what's going on with Anthony Richardson. This whole we're bringing in competition thing was just a ruse, just a front to bring in an actual other quarterback. So Daniel Jones had to be convinced he was legitimately going to win that job, although he's going to have to mouth that it's a competition. And he's just there to make it better. Daniel Jones is going to be the starting quarterback of the Colts, barring injury. And we already have started to see the Anthony Richardson trade rumors. I'm sure the Colts are going to trade Anthony Richardson, whether it's before the training camps or whenever. The Colts will probably wait until the draft to potentially make that trade. They're probably talking to Pittsburgh potentially right now, but I don't know if anybody's buying Anthony Richardson. Everybody's starting to sense and realize the issues with him. But Daniel Jones is going to be the starting quarterback for the Colts, and then I'm sure they're going to draft a day 3 type quarterback for the future, because Daniel Jones is only on a 1-year deal. But so was Baker Mayfield. I'm not suggesting Daniel Jones is anywhere near the talent of a Baker Mayfield, but this is what you do with these type of rehab quarterbacks: is you give them a 1-year thing, see if they pan out. You can always, Sam Darnold, you can always give them a big contract after if they prove themselves. So that's where Daniel Jones is at, the new starting quarterback of the Colts. I would almost guarantee that is going to happen. The Solomon Thomas news was fake of him going to, I forget what, they had some big, like $45 million contract number that he was going to. I can't remember. I think it was Washington. That just seems so shocking. Like, why would anybody pay that for Solomon Thomas? That was fake news. He ended up doing a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Cowboys. The Eagles acquired Kenyon Green, offensive lineman from Houston. That terrible Houston offensive line that the Texans are smartly getting rid of and retooling. They dumped Kenyon Green on the Eagles. Maybe the Eagles will turn them around like they tend to do with offensive linemen. They get C.J. Gardner-Johnson in return. Nobody ever seems to want C.J. Gardner-Johnson for more than 1 year, and then they're shipping him away. I know he's a bit of a piece of work, but news report that Mike Garofalo reporting that the Giants had great conversations with Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure he has. Rodgers can only go right now to Pittsburgh and the Giants, so where he's going to choose to go remains unknown. We think it's going to be Russell Wilson to the Giants, leaving Aaron Rodgers to have to go to Pittsburgh, but it wouldn't surprise me if Aaron Rodgers also chose to retire or just sit out and wait for some opportunity to pop up. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to force himself into an aggravating situation if he doesn't feel like the offense in Pittsburgh suits him, and I don't know that it does. I don't know any quarterback with reasonable options is going to want to play for the Steelers' offense with Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin. And I know that they're trying to sell him on DK. We got DK Metcalf and we got George Pickens, but they have a terrible offensive line, and I'm sure they're going to trade George Pickens. That was part of the DJ Metcalf thing, is basically they're swapping DJ Metcalf in for George Pickens going out, is what I believe is going to happen in Pittsburgh. So it's not as juicy in Pittsburgh as it seems. A.J. Dillon got cleared. That's a Dynasty sleeper situation, and A.J. Dillon coming back. Not that he's coming back and he's going to become a starter anywhere, but he's going to land somewhere to get an opportunity to be a part of a backfield, and then he could be a handcuff option at some point. Wouldn't be shocked if he joined Minnesota on a very basic deal to team back up with Aaron Jones, because they're buddies and they like to travel together. So I could see A.J. Dillon going to Minnesota on a very basic deal to be like a number 3 running back. The Chiefs, a pretty savvy move for the Chiefs here in the last 24 hours. They signed Kristen Fulton from the Chargers, 2 years, $20 million. He's a solid corner. That's a nice little pickup, and they've seen him over the. They saw him last year with the Chargers, so they must have liked what they saw. Tom Pelissero reporting that Anthony Richardson won't request a trade. I don't think he's going to request a trade, but I think the Colts are going to trade him. Panthers released the great Miles Sanders, who was always an overrated kind of fraud running back. So his time in the NFL looks like it might be nearing an end. Texans signed Laken Tomlinson, part of their offensive line redo. That's fine. That's some depth or a possible starter if they need it. I'm sure the Texans are going to hit offensive line hard in the draft. Commanders signed Will Harris from the Saints, a safety, a cheap deal that's just a depth guy. Mario Edwards back to the Texans is fine. MJ Stewart back to the Texans is fine. 49ers, as I wrote in my piece this morning in RC's notes, that the 49ers are totally dismantling their team, which everybody can see, but I think it's not everybody believes it's because they're doing a total retooling of their team, because they see that they're not competitive with the Rams, the Vikings, the Lions. They went a year too long with their core. They're ditching everything, getting themselves in great cap shape. They may be okay this year, like eight win team or so, but they're really looking to 2026 for a big draft haul. They got a lot of draft picks, a lot of compensation picks this year, and if they get more next year, there's a youth movement. They're trying to do what the Rams did a couple years ago. Now it's San Francisco's time to dismantle and rebuild. Zay Jones back to the Cardinals. I don't get the allure of Zay Jones, but it's something for depth. Joe Tryon leaves the Bucks, goes to the Browns on a basic contract. That's no big deal. Kevontae Turpin, 3 years, $18 million. For a special teamer, he's worth it, especially because he showed flashes of being a real weapon as a jet sweep and bubble screen and deep ball wide receiver. There's more with Turpin to be had than just the return game, and maybe Brian Schottenheimer is going to advance it further than what Mike McCarthy was starting to do late last year. Maybe Schottenheimer's going to go forward. I like Turpin as a deep sleeper in deep league Dynasty. Curtis Robinson to the 49ers, Patrick Ricard to the Ravens, Darrington Evans, depth running back, goes back to the Bills. He's just going to be a practice squad kind of guy. Anthony Nelson re-signs with Tampa Bay. He's a good locker room guy, good depth on the defensive line. Juwan Johnson re-signs with the Saints. I had the Saints as the loser of the day for Tuesday, March 11th news. I have to look down and check because I'm doing the show the next day as a review of the prior day, so I had to keep my date straight. So this is Tuesday news, and I had the Saints as the loser of Tuesday because they're signing their own. They got nobody interesting in free agency. They're tight on cap space, and then they're just re-signing their own, and then made a mistake that we'll get to be in the headlines here coming up. But the Saints they're not getting any better. They were already in a precarious position with the cap, and what they're spending their money on is head scratching to me. Commanders re-signed Jeremy McNichols. Mike Brown, an interesting safety, re-signs back with the Titans. With Colts, we signed Wesley French. Falcons bring back Mike Hughes, who's always a good slot corner. Dante Pettis re-signs with the Saints. Leonard Floyd ends up going to the Falcons. I never understand all the money that gets thrown at Leonard Floyd to be a specific rotational edge rusher. You could get a million guys to do what he does, but he always gets a $10 million deal every year to go out and get a handful of sacks and otherwise leave a big gap when he doesn't get to the quarterback, which is most of the time, like most edge rushers. So Falcons desperate for pass rushers by Leonard Floyd. Cowboys snag Peyton Turner away from the Saints on a cheap deal. Peyton Turner has a ton of talent, but it never materialized in the NFL with the Saints. But maybe the Cowboys are gonna figure out something to do with them. Didn't cost them much to take a look. Malcolm Kuntz says he's going to be ready for the start of the season. That's a key player for the Raiders. That's a nice, interesting young pass rusher that lost his 2024 to ACL. Luke Gifford to the 49ers. The Saints signed Justin Reed, $22 million guaranteed on a $31 million contract. And Justin Reed is fine, but the Saints weren't a safety away. They have limited money. They're spending it on a safety, and they're overpaying for the safety position when they got so many other things to worry about. But then they also plowed a bunch of money into Chase Young. They had limited money, and they're spending it, to me, on all of the wrong things. That team just feels like it's in a death spiral. Chiefs signed Robert Tonyan. That's no big deal. Jacoby Brissett goes to Arizona to be a backup. Johnny Hecker is back with... Johnny Hecker signs with the Titans. Nick Neiman, who I think is a decent little contributor, football player, linebacker. He signed with the Texans, leaving the Chargers. Nick Westbrook-Akine signs with the Dolphins, a very cheap deal. For the seasons that he's had, I thought he should have gone for more money, and this is not a great place for him to be for fantasy football purposes. He's a deep ball guy with Tua, who's not a deep ball thrower, in the sense that he will throw to Tyreek Hill deep when Tyreek Hill 2 years ago was beating everybody by 5 yards on deep ball routes. But now the defenses have adjusted and are all playing back. Tua is back to dink and dunk land, and that's not really Nick Westbrook's game. You want him to more kind of stretch the field a little bit and be a big weapon. Not a weapon, he's not a weapon, but be a big option on the outside. I just don't see that he's going to be relevant in Miami unless some wide receivers get hurt. Ty Johnson back to the Bills. Josh Allen proclaims him the best third down back in the league, then uses him for one pass a game. Ashton Davis goes to the Dolphins. Jack Gibbons goes, or he's just being allowed to hit free agency. Rams get Coleman Shelton off the Bears, where he was there as a backup and starter a couple years ago. So he's just going back home. Ravens, Cowboys, and Dolphins got the maximum 4 compensatory picks this year. Arthur Millette got released by the Ravens. Then they turn around and sign DeAndre Hopkins, who looks like he's really reaching the end of his career. So I think it's a year or two too late by the Ravens. Xavier Woods always seems to find a place to be a starting safety, and he's going to be that for now the Tennessee Titans on a 2-year, $10 million deal. That's a solid move. If you're going to invest in a safety, that's about all you want to invest in. And he's fine. He's experienced. Devin Bush re-signed by the Browns. I have no idea why. Raiders signed Eric Stokes. Eric Stokes, former first-round draft pick. There were moments in the NFL, especially early on, where he was a lockdown corner. He lost his way. There's things off the field that are taking him down, injuries as well. So the Raiders are going to try to do a cheap rehab on him. That makes sense. Ravens released Marcus Williams. I'm sure he'll find work. Evan Ingram visiting with the Chargers. If he wants to have a lack of output, he should sign with the Chargers' weak passing game. low volume passing game. I really wish he would go to Denver and team up with Bo Nix and Sean Payton for fantasy purposes. Jason Pinnock signed by the 49ers. I had Pinnock as one of my great value deep sleepers in free agency among the DBs. He's a safety and a corner. A couple years ago, he was really had a nice season. Last year, mixed results, but that's a little smart, cheap signing by the 49ers. Trent Sherfield to the Broncos, that never seems to matter. Demarcus Robinson to the 49ers is, I mean, it's something. I don't know. I mean, they've already got Juwan Johnson, who's Purdy's favorite wide receiver remaining. They've got a lot of money in Ayuk. They've got Ricky Pearsall. So why bring in Demarcus Robinson on 2-year, $9.5 million deal? I'm wondering if this is giving them a cushion to make a trade of Brandon Ayuk coming up. Just a guess or a hunch. He could be brought in as a number 4 receiver, but I don't. That $9.5 million, 6 of the 9.5 is guaranteed. So, I mean, he could be a number 4, a strong number 4 receiver, but that may be paving the way for Brandon Ayuk to go. Steelers signed Kenneth Gainwell, who's never really panned out. The Bills signed Joey Bosa. Again, I do not understand this allure with these pass rushers that are always so inefficient, so useless on most of the snaps that they play. Yes, every other game or so they're getting a sack. They get a pressure a game, maybe. But then there's 50 other snaps that they're really not important. But the good news is that the 49ers didn't go in on Bosa, so that kind of lets you know the 49ers are definitely retooling because they didn't waste money on a Bosa. Then the last bit of news is Roy Lopez, a defensive tackle that I have liked since I scouted him. I think he was New Mexico State. I really liked him. He went undrafted, and then he became a good NFL defensive tackle. The Lions got him, of course. There's the Lions, like the Vikings, getting defensive tackle help, not chasing edge rushers. So that's the news from yesterday. I'm going to look through the NFL transactions real quick to see if I see a name that didn't hit the news wires. As I scroll down so far, it looks like every side. Pete Werner, the Saints, redid his deal because the Saints are in a weird cap spot, so they keep re-signing their own, which is really redoing deals with them. Quentin Bell re-signed back with Miami. That's not massive news by any means. Kalen Saunders for the Saints redid his deal. Again, the Saints just keep redoing deals. So did Cesar Ruiz. So did Carl Granderson. So the Saints are doing what they needed to do, but they're just pushing this bubble into next year and the year after. The Saints are. If the Saints were a business, you'd have to give them you'd have to lower all of their bond ratings and credit ratings because that thing is a house of cards. A lot of mediocre talents on inflated contracts that they can't get out of, so they keep restructuring them, causing a current issue but then a real problem to try to get out of them next year. They're going to be doing the same things next year, pushing the bubble down the road. So that is it for all the news items. Working on update of the Dynasty top 600 offensive players today. So as we've got a lot of the free agency news is in. I'm kind of waiting for Rodgers and Russ to settle in so we can properly project that offense. But all we can do right now is make assumptions on who the quarterbacks are going to be there. Working on my combine positional regrades that'll just keep trickling out over the next week or two, and then posted the Trey Harris scouting report that I think you're going to want to read. I posted that yesterday, and don't overlook that JJ McCarthy report that I did, that special scouting report that I did on JJ McCarthy that posted 2 days ago. So that is it for the news. That is it for daily Dynasty briefing on the news from Tuesday, March the 11th.